The star loomed ahead like a wounded giant, its surface boiling with waves of plasma that looked as though the universe itself was bleeding. Alarms screamed across the ship, lights flashing red as the hull groaned under the star's pull. Arik steadied himself against the console, his voice hoarse. Arik said, "It shouldn't be sending signals. Stars don't speak." The crew exchanged panicked glances, their silence louder than the alarms. The message repeated, alien symbols glowing across the monitor, carrying a rhythm like a heartbeat. Arik muttered, "This isn't natural. This is a warning or a call." The ship trembled violently, sparks raining from overhead panels. A young officer cried out, "We can't hold position much longer." Arik's hands shook, but his voice grew firm. Arik said, "We stay. Whatever's inside that star is trying to be found, and if we turn away now, someone else will answer it first." When the alarms dulled into background noise, Arik studied the patterns on the screen again, his voice rough with awe and fear. Arik said, "This isn't noise. It's structured, deliberate." The crew fell silent as the golden symbols shifted like living flame, forming repeating sequences that felt like language. Arik whispered, "It's an invitation, or a trap." The moral confidant stepped closer, voice calm. He said, "Then either way, we can't ignore it. We're already inside the storm." A long silence followed, broken only by the hum of the ship straining against gravity. The crew erupted into argument, fear boiling over into desperation. A young navigator shouted, "We should pull away now before it rips us apart." Another officer countered, "And hand this to the enemy. They'll come, they always do." Arik slammed his hand onto the console, silencing them. His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed the storm inside. Arik said, "We're explorers, not deserters. If this star is hiding something, then it was meant to be found. If we leave, the galaxy pays the price." Silence thickened, every pair of eyes locked on him, half afraid, half inspired. Without warning, the star erupted, sending a flare slicing past the ship like a blade of fire. The hull screamed, the floor buckled, and crew members were hurled against walls. Arik was slammed sideways, but held the console, shouting through the chaos. Arik said, "Stabilizers to maximum. Seal bulkheads." Sparks flew across the deck, smoke rising. The young officer screamed, "We can't hold her, Commander." For a heartbeat, it seemed the ship would tear apart. Then the flare passed, leaving silence broken only by shallow breathing and groaning metal. Arik whispered hoarsely, "It wants to kill us before we even begin." In the aftermath, silence clung like ash. The crew looked broken, eyes wide with fear and exhaustion. Arik stood tall despite blood trickling from a cut on his temple. His voice was quiet, but carried across the room. Arik said, "You've seen the fire, you've felt its wrath, but something survived inside that star. Something built to last." He raised his chin, eyes hard as steel. Arik said, "If we don't claim it, the galaxy will burn under the hands of those who will. So we stay, we fight the star, and we find what it hides." No one spoke, but slowly, crew members straightened, fear still in their eyes but bound now with grim resolve. Long after the chaos of the flare, the ship settled into a tense silence, only the hum of strained engines filling the void. Arik sat alone in his quarters, his face dimly lit by the fading glow of the star outside. His hands trembled as he reached for a worn data chip, sliding it into the console. A flickering projection filled the room. Faces of those he had lost long ago, frozen in their final transmissions. He closed his eyes, pain cutting deeper than any wound. Arik whispered, "I told them we'd be safe. I promised," and the star swallowed them like it was nothing. His chest heaved as he pressed his palms into his face, trembling with guilt. "And now it calls me again, demanding another price. How many more will I lose before this ends?" His voice cracked, broken and raw, as though confessing to the ghosts that haunted him. In the mess hall, the crew gathered with hushed voices, fear still etched across their tired faces. A young engineer whispered, "Every time the star breathes, it feels like it's trying to tear us apart." A navigator replied bitterly, Or maybe it's trying to warn us to leave. The words hung heavy until Eric entered, silence falling instantly. He looked worn, blood still on his temple, but his eyes carried fire. Eric said, "I won't force any of you to stay, but I can't abandon this. That signal isn't random. It's something buried inside the star, and if we turn away, the galaxy will pay for our cowardice." The room filled with uneasy glances, some faces hardened with loyalty, others shadowed with doubt. The silence stretched as the crew wrestled with their fear and their trust in him. Later, the moral confidant found Eric leaning against a bulkhead, staring out at the dying star with haunted eyes. His voice was calm, steady, like the anchor Eric didn't know he needed. Moral confidant said, "You carry them with you every day, don't you? The ones you lost?" Eric didn't answer at first, his lips pressed into a thin line. Finally, he whispered, "I see their faces every time I close my eyes. I wonder if they'd hate me for dragging another crew into the fire." The moral confidant placed a hand on his shoulder. "They'd hate you more if you stopped fighting. You're not running from ghosts, Eric. You're chasing hope, even if you can't see it yet." Eric's jaw tightened, and for the first time in years, he let someone else's words quiet the storm inside him. The survivors stood apart from the others, scars tracing their face like a map of suffering, eyes hard as stone. When Eric approached, the survivor said coldly, "You think this star frightens me? I've crawled through the bones of entire fleets, watched friends die while screaming for help that never came. Whatever's inside that thing, I've seen worse." Eric studied them carefully, sensing both strength and deep fracture. He said, "Then you understand better than anyone what happens if it falls into the wrong hands." The survivor's lips curled into a bitter smile. "Wrong hands? Every hand is wrong. Yours. Mine. Theirs. Power like that doesn't save anyone. It only decides who gets to live long enough to suffer." Eric's voice lowered. "Then maybe it's not about power. Maybe it's about making sure suffering doesn't spread." The survivor turned away, but not before Eric saw a flicker of agreement in their eyes. Later, in the stillness of his quarters, Eric activated his private log. His voice shook as he spoke, the weight of leadership pressing on every word. Eric said, "If anyone finds this, know that I never asked for this burden. I'm no hero. I failed before, and I may fail again. But if this star hides what I think it does, failure means the end of more than just one crew. It means the galaxy itself burns." His breath caught as he lowered his head into his hands. Eric whispered, "I can't let them see how much I doubt myself. They need strength, not truth, so I'll give them strength, even if I break under it." His final words cracked with raw honesty. "If I fail them, I won't forgive myself. Not this time. Not ever." The log flickered off, leaving him in suffocating silence. The control deck lights dimmed as a piercing alert ripped through the ship. Eric's stomach twisted as the reading spiked across his screen. "They found us," he muttered, voice low but sharp. The crew rushed to their stations, fear flashing in every movement. A young officer cried, "Multiple ships incoming, war signatures. They're already closing the gap." Eric's chest tightened. The antagonist's faction was moving faster than expected. He said, "We've barely touched the surface of this star's secrets, and already they're here to claim it." The moral confidant leaned forward, eyes heavy with dread. "They're not coming to study it, Eric. They're coming to wield it." The crew exchanged looks of horror, the hum of the ship drowned out by the weight of what was about to unfold. Eric whispered to himself, "Then we fight the storm before it consumes us." Hours later, the alarms dulled into silence, but tension only grew thicker. In the crew quarters, hushed voices traded suspicion. One officer hissed, "They knew where we were. That's not luck. That's a leak." Another snapped, "Are you accusing one of us?" Silence fell heavy as Eric entered, eyes scanning the room with exhaustion and fire. "We have a traitor among us," he said, voice steady despite the rage beneath. The crew stiffened, every gaze shifting. The betrayer sat quietly in the corner, eyes lowered, hands clasped in false humility. The room vibrated with distrust, and Eric's voice cut like steel. Whoever sent that signal has painted a target on all our backs. Until I know who, we fight as one. But hear me well, if I find the traitor, I'll cast them into the star myself. The silence after his words was sharper than any blade. Later, Eric paced in the corridor, the echo of his boots a rhythm of anger. The betrayer approached with a look of false sympathy. Betrayer said, "You're wearing yourself thin, Commander. They don't trust you when you speak of traitors. They think you're desperate." Eric froze, jaw tightening. "And what do you think?" he asked bitterly. The betrayer smirked faintly. "I think you're chasing shadows while the real threat burns right in front of you. Maybe the galaxy doesn't need heroes clinging to guilt. It needs someone willing to act." Eric's fists clenched. "I act. I've bled for this crew." The betrayer's voice dipped, almost a whisper. "Bleeding isn't the same as leading, and when they see that, they may choose someone else." The words sank like poison, but Eric met his gaze with steel. "If you're angling for power, you'd better be ready for the weight that comes with it." The ship jolted violently as alarms screamed again. Raiders poured from the darkness, weapons fire cutting through the void, slamming into the hull. Crew scrambled as the ship shook like a dying beast. Eric barked orders: shields to maximum, divert all power to forward cannons. Sparks rained as consoles blew apart, crew thrown to the floor. The young officer screamed, "They're tearing us apart, we can't last." Eric gritted his teeth, refusing to yield. "We've survived worse storms. Hold the line." Explosions roared, metal shrieked, and the void outside blazed with streaks of fire. The moral confidant's voice cut through the chaos. "Eric, if we fall here, the star keeps its secret, but they take our lives. You must choose survival." For a heartbeat, doubt flashed in Eric's eyes, but he shook it away, bellowing, "We fight, we endure. We don't give them the star." His voice rose above the destruction like a blade. The battle faded, leaving the ship crippled, the deck shrouded in smoke. Crew coughed, slumped against walls, eyes hollow with exhaustion. Eric stood at the center, chest heaving, every breath a reminder of how close they had come to death. He looked at the cracked console, alien symbols still pulsing faintly through fractured glass. His voice dropped into a whisper. Eric said, "They're ahead of us now. The enemy knows more than we do." The moral confidant stepped forward, voice heavy with grief. "We can't survive another fight like that, Eric. If they reach the weapon first." Eric cut him off, his eyes blazing with fire. "Then we take it from their hands, even if it kills us." The crew watched in silence, knowing that death was no longer a distant threat. It was the road they were already walking. The control room was eerily quiet, the ship limping through the void after the ambush. Eric's eyes narrowed as he scanned the system logs, his chest tightening. He whispered, "This doesn't add up." The moral confidant leaned closer. "What is it?" Eric's voice hardened, every syllable carrying a blade. "The data logs. They've been altered. Trajectory files, communication timestamps. Someone inside tampered with them." The crew froze, faces pale under the dim red glow. The young officer shook her head. "But that means..." Eric slammed his fist into the console, sparks scattering. "It means the traitor didn't just warn them. They've been steering us into traps all along." His gaze swept across the crew, every eye avoiding his. The silence grew unbearable as the weight of betrayal pressed like gravity, suffocating them all. In the crew hall, accusations flared like wildfire. One officer shouted, "You've been too quiet since this started. What are you hiding?" Another snapped back, "I've bled for this ship. Don't you dare point at me." The air thickened with distrust until Eric slammed his palm against the wall, his voice cutting through like thunder. "Enough." His eyes swept across the room, voice dropping lower, colder. "If I wanted you dead, I'd let the star finish the job. But no, someone here wants to kill us slower. Piece by piece. You've poisoned our course, our trust, our survival. And when I find you..." He leaned forward, jaw tight, voice nearly breaking with rage. "I'll end you myself." Silence crashed into the room, every crew member trembling under his vow. Later, Eric stood in the corridor, hands pressed into the cold steel, chest heaving. The betrayer approached with measured steps, voice calm, almost soothing. Betrayer said, "You're unraveling, Commander. They see it. Every outburst, every threat. It's proof you're losing control." Eric turned sharply, eyes burning. "And what would you know of control, when lies drip from your tongue like venom?" The betrayer smirked, tilting his head. "Control is power. And power isn't in truth, it's in what people believe. They don't need to trust me. They just need to doubt you. That's how leaders fall." Eric's breath caught, rage tightening every muscle. But the betrayer only leaned closer, whispering, "And when they doubt you enough, I'll be the one they follow into the fire." The words clung like smoke, choking Eric in silence. Without warning, the comms panel crackled to life, a distorted transmission slicing through the static. A cloaked figure appeared in fragments, voice low and cryptic. "Hidden ally said, you're not fighting the star. You're fighting those who seek to own it. The weapon is not a tool, it is judgment." Eric stepped closer, fists clenched. "Who are you? Why warn us now?" The hidden ally's form flickered, voice dripping with urgency. "Because time is running out. They've already breached the outer systems. If you hesitate, they will reach the core before you. And if they touch it, the galaxy burns." The signal cut suddenly, leaving only silence. The crew stared in shock, and Eric whispered, "Judgment or annihilation?" His voice echoed, heavy with dread. Hours later, Eric stood alone before the viewport, watching the dying star pulse with violent beauty. His reflection stared back at him, gaunt and haunted. He whispered, "It's not a weapon. It's a choice." The moral confidant entered quietly, his voice low. "A choice that could save or damn us all." Eric didn't look away from the star. If it's judgment, then who decides who lives and who burns? Us, them? No one should wield that power. His fists tightened against the glass, knuckles white. The moral confidant placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then you must make sure it's not taken, no matter the cost." Eric exhaled shakily, his voice dropping to a vow. "Even if it costs me every soul aboard, I'll bury it inside the star before I let them use it." His eyes glowed with grim fire, and the star's reflection burned brighter in his gaze. The ship crept closer to the dying star, its violent light bleeding through every viewport. The air thrummed with a low vibration, as though the star itself had a pulse. Suddenly, the screens flared with readings beyond comprehension, jagged lines screaming across the monitors. Eric's voice was rough. "It's not just a star. There's something inside." The young officer gasped, pointing to the display. "That's a structure, metal embedded in plasma. No natural formation could survive this heat." The moral confidant's eyes widened. "It's a shell. They built a cage around the star's heart." Silence swallowed the deck until Eric whispered, "Not a cage. A weapon, a machine waiting to wait." The words clung to the crew like chains, every breath heavy with terror and awe. The readings deepened, displaying a lattice of impossible geometry spiraling around the core. The moral confidant spoke softly, voice trembling with both wonder and dread. "This was no accident. An ancient race built this not to save themselves, but to shape destiny itself." Eric's voice shook as he replied, "Harnessing the death of a star. To create life or destroy it. Creation and extinction, locked inside one dying heart." The survivor stepped forward, scars catching the glow. He spat. "You call it destiny. I call it madness. No one should wield that kind of power." Eric's jaw tightened. Yet here it is, waiting. And if we don't claim it, the antagonist will. The crew fell into stunned silence, as though the universe itself had shifted beneath their feet. Alarms screamed as hostile ships broke through the outer perimeter, the antagonist's faction arriving in brutal formation. The crew scrambled to stations, chaos roaring back to life. Eric's voice thundered across the deck. "They're here. They know what sleeps in this star. The comms crackled, the antagonist's voice sharp and cold, dripping with confidence. "Antagonist," said Eric, always stumbling in shadows. "Step aside and I might let you live long enough to see the galaxy reborn under my hand." Eric spat back. "You'll kill billions chasing power you can't control." A low laugh echoed through the comms. "Billions are nothing compared to eternity. I'll wield the fire of creation itself and the galaxy will kneel." The crew froze as the words sank in, and Eric muttered, "Over my corpse." As chaos raged, the betrayer finally dropped the mask. With a smooth flick of his wrist, he slid a data drive into the console, streams of code bleeding into the system. Eric shouted, "What are you doing?" The betrayer turned slowly, a twisted calm on his face. Betrayer said, "I've given them what they want. Codes to unlock the weapon's shell. You think you're saving lives, but you're only delaying the inevitable. At least this way, I'll stand on the winning side." The crew erupted in shouts of rage and disbelief, but the betrayer smirked. "You never deserved their trust, Eric. You cling to ghosts, while I carve the future." Eric's voice broke with fury. "You've damned us all for your pride." For the first time, the betrayer's smile faltered, but his defiance held like steel. Silence fell after the chaos, broken only by the hum of the star outside, glowing brighter as though answering the codes. Eric stood trembling, rage and despair warring within him. He whispered, "We're not fighting for survival anymore." His voice rose, cutting through the stillness, every word trembling with fire. "We're fighting for the soul of the galaxy." The moral confidant's eyes glistened with grief. "Then you must carry the weight no one else can. If you falter, the galaxy burns." The survivor slammed his fist into the wall. "Then we fight, until the void swallows us whole." The crew, battered and broken, straightened slowly, their eyes meeting Eric's. They were terrified, but his fury had become their anchor. Eric's voice dropped into a vow, heavy as iron. "If the star demands blood, then it will have mine before it takes the galaxy." The star shook violently, each flare stronger than the last, as though it sensed what was coming. The crew braced themselves, consoles flickering with static. Eric stood at the center, his voice hoarse but thunderous. Eric said, "We've run out of time. The weapon is waking." The moral confidant stepped closer, his tone steady but heavy with sorrow. "Then you must make your choice. Hold it, destroy it, or let them claim it. Every road costs lives." The crew murmured in fear, some whispering prayers. Eric slammed his fist into the console. "No more hesitation. If the antagonist seizes this, the galaxy will kneel in chains." Sparks rained, the ship trembling like a dying beast. He roared above the chaos, "We fight to the last breath. No one steals fire from the stars while I still breathe." The comms roared to life, the antagonist's voice cutting through like poisoned silk. Antagonist said, "Eric, stop this madness. You can't cage eternity. Give me the codes, and I'll grant you and your crew mercy." Eric spat, his voice shaking with fury. "Mercy? You'll scorch worlds and call it salvation." The antagonist chuckled darkly. "Sacrifice is the currency of progress. Do you think history remembers the weak who tried to stand in its way?" Eric's chest heaved, the rage boiling over. "History remembers monsters, and you're about to become the darkest of them all." The crew watched as silence followed, heavy as a tomb. Then the antagonist whispered, voice dripping with venom, "Then die with your ghosts." The betrayer stood, finally throwing aside all pretenses, his voice sharp and filled with twisted pride. "Betrayer said, he's right, Eric. You can't stop this. I've given them access to the weapon's heart. You were too blind, too weak, too bound by ghosts to lead us." The crew erupted in furious shouts, some surging forward, others frozen in shock. Eric's face hardened, voice breaking into a roar. "You fed them our blood for your ambition. You damned us all for your pride." The betrayer sneered, his voice rising with poisonous conviction. "No, I freed us. You cling to morality like a drowning man clings to air. But this galaxy doesn't need morals. It needs power." and I will stand with the ones who have. Arik lunged, grabbing the betrayer by the collar, snarling, "Then you'll burn with them." The ship convulsed as the star unleashed another flare, but this one was different. The entire hull vibrated like a bell, struck by a god. The survivor clung to the rail, voice booming above the chaos. Survivor said, "This is it. It's waking fully now. The core is no longer asleep, it's choosing sides." Arik's jaw clenched as he steadied himself against the console. "Then it will choose those strong enough to resist it." The survivor shook his head with bitterness. No, Commander. It doesn't choose the strong. It chooses the desperate, and that means anyone willing to sacrifice everything." The words sank deep, the room falling silent except for the groaning of the ship's frame. Eric's eyes burned as he muttered, "Then I'll show it desperation the likes of which it's never seen." The star's light flooded the deck, blinding, beautiful, and horrifying. The crew shielded their eyes as alien patterns shimmered across every surface. The moral confidant stepped forward, his voice trembling. "Eric, it's reaching out to you. The codes, the lattice. It responds to your presence." Eric froze, his body shaking under the weight of realization. "It wants me," he whispered, voice breaking. "It knows my name. It knows my blood." The crew gasped as the moral confidant whispered, "Maybe you weren't led here by chance. Maybe you were chosen." Eric's fists clenched, his voice cracking with fury and despair. "I wasn't chosen. I was cursed. Every soul I lost brought me here, and now it demands more. If I take this power, I'll become the very monster I swore to fight." He closed his eyes, chest heaving, then roared with defiance, "But I'll burn before I let it consume me." The ship drifted in battered silence, the star blazing brighter with every passing second. The crew's eyes were hollow, their uniforms torn, their spirits stretched thin. Eric stood at the viewport, sweat dripping down his temple, chest heaving. He whispered, "We've come too far to leave it behind, but if we seize it, we lose ourselves." The moral confidant stepped forward, his voice calm but threaded with sorrow. "You're right. Every choice now costs a future. If you destroy it, billions die defenseless. If you wield it, billions die under control. And if you walk away, the antagonist wins." Eric's voice cracked as he turned. Fury and despair laced together. "Then what's left? What's left but ashes?" The room sank into silence, the weight of inevitability pressing down on every soul aboard. The antagonist's face filled the comms, dark eyes burning with cold triumph. Antagonist said, "You're broken, Eric. Your crew clings to scraps while I hold destiny. You can't destroy the star, you don't have the strength." Eric stepped closer, his voice raw. "Strength isn't what keeps us alive, it's will, and mine hasn't broken yet." The antagonist sneered. "Will is fragile. It bends, it shatters, and soon you'll bend to me, or you'll burn with the rest." Eric's jaw clenched, his teeth grinding, then he snarled back, "Better to burn free than live chained to your madness." The crew stirred, their fear melting into something harder, heavier, resolve. The antagonist smirked one last time before the comms cut, but the poison of his words lingered like smoke. The survivor staggered forward, scars catching the molten light. His voice was rough, jagged like stone. "I've lived through hells no one else could survive. I've watched worlds burn. I've seen power fall into the hands of monsters. If you don't end this now, you'll be one of them, Eric," another tyrant with blood on his hands. Eric's eyes blazed as he snapped, "And if I destroy it, then I've condemned billions to die defenseless. You think that makes me clean?" The survivor roared back, his fists pounding the steel wall. "Nothing makes us clean. Survival isn't about purity. It's about choosing which scars we carry." His voice broke into a whisper, trembling. "So carry this scar, Commander, destroy it, and let the galaxy live free, even if it bleeds." Silence followed, broken only by the hum of the star as though it too awaited his answer. In the quiet of the bridge, the moral confidant spoke softly, his eyes wet with unshed tears. "You've carried ghosts for years, Eric. Every face you lost, every promise you broke, every vow that haunts your sleep. They've brought you here. not to punish you, to test you. Eric's lips trembled as he whispered, "And if I fail?" The moral confidant laid a hand on his shoulder, firm, unwavering. "Then you fail as a man who stood and fought, not as one who cowered and ran. That's all any of us can do." Eric's throat closed, his vision blurring with grief and fire. He whispered, "Then this is the end. My ghosts will finally rest, even if I don't." The moral confidant's voice cracked, trembling. "No, Commander. They'll rest because you gave them meaning." The words pierced Eric's chest like a blade, steadying him where hope had already died. The dying star roared, erupting with one final surge as Eric stepped forward, every nerve in his body screaming. He placed his hands against the console, voice rising like fire. "I am no tyrant. I am no savior. I am only a man who refuses to let this galaxy burn." The alien symbols blazed, filling the deck with searing light. The antagonist's ships closed in, weapons charging, but Eric shouted above it all, "This ends now." The console screamed back with a surge of molten brilliance, and the star itself erupted, swallowing the weapon, the codes, the betrayers, and the invaders in a wave of incandescent fire. The crew shielded their eyes, screams swallowed by the roar of a dying sun. And in the silence after, Eric whispered his final vow, "If my ghosts still walk beside me, at least they'll know I never stopped fighting."